Max Lowell adjusted his tie and took a deep breath as he prepared to walk onto the stage. Tonight marked the official launch of his campaign for President of the United States. He had worked hard to reach this point, building a career as a respected senator known for his integrity and focus on the future of America. But he knew that his family's shadow hung over him, darkening the bright lights of his ambition. As the announcer called his name, the audience erupted in applause. Max stepped forward, smiled, and waved at the crowd. He delivered a passionate speech about unity, progress, and hope, carefully avoiding any reference to his family's past. He wanted people to see him as a man of his own making, not just the son of Robert Lowell, his father, whose political career had ended in scandal. His father had once been one of the most powerful men in Washington, a senator with influence and connections across the country. But in his final years, Robert Lowell's legacy had crumbled. Allegations of corruption and bribery surfaced, tainting not only his reputation, but also the family name. Max had spent years trying to distance himself from the shadow his father left behind, working to build a new reputation of honesty and commitment. After the speech, Max made his way backstage, where he found his mother, Mary Lowell, waiting for him. She was impeccably dressed in a dark suit, her gray hair pulled back in a bun, her expression as sharp and focused as ever. Mary was the quiet force behind the Lowell family, a woman who had never held office herself, but who had connections and influence that most politicians could only dream of. "Well done, Max," she said, her voice steady but her gaze intense. "The people believe in you." "Thank you, Mother," Max replied, feeling a familiar mix of pride and anxiety. Despite her support, he knew his mother could be both a powerful ally and a harsh critic. Mary took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Max, this campaign will be difficult. You'll be facing opponents who have no reservations about using our family's past against you. I need to know you're prepared for what lies ahead." "I am," Max replied firmly, though he could feel the pressure building in his chest. He knew what she was really asking. "Are you ready to do whatever it takes?" "Good," Mary said, a slight smile forming on her lips. "Because I'm prepared to support you with everything this family has to offer. The connections, the finances, and the influence we've built over generations. But I have one condition." Max felt his pulse quicken. His mother rarely made demands, but when she did, she expected obedience. "What condition?" he asked, his voice careful. "You must win," Mary said, her eyes narrowing. "No matter what happens, you cannot allow this family to suffer another defeat. If you fail, our name will be tarnished beyond repair. I won't risk everything just to watch you fall short. If you can't guarantee victory, I won't offer my support." Max looked into his mother's eyes, understanding the weight of her words. Her support came at a high price, one that demanded complete commitment. He had always known that this campaign would require sacrifice, but hearing his mother's ultimatum made the stakes feel even higher. "Understood," he said, nodding. "I'll win." Mary's expression softened, just slightly. "Good. Remember, Max, you carry the Lowell name. It's more than a legacy, it's a responsibility. Make us proud and don't let anyone stand in your way." As she walked away, Max stood alone in the empty corridor, her words echoing in his mind. He had expected her support, but he hadn't anticipated the condition that came with it. He realized that winning wasn't just about his own ambition. It was about preserving his family's honor, reclaiming the respect they had lost, and proving that he could rise above his father's mistakes. For Max Lowell, failure was no longer an option. The weight of the Lowell legacy rested squarely on his shoulders, and there would be no turning back. Max Lowell stared at the poll numbers on his laptop screen, feeling the familiar pressure settling in his chest. His opponent, Alyssa Parker, was surging ahead in several key states. Charismatic, idealistic, and progressive, Alyssa represented a vision for America that resonated with younger voters and urban communities. Her campaign had become a movement, one that threatened to overshadow Max's more traditional platform. It was during one of these tense mornings that Max's campaign manager, Nathaniel Price, entered his office. his expression unreadable. He closed the door quietly, then took a seat across from Max. "Max," Nathaniel began carefully, "there's someone you should meet. Someone who can give you the support you need to catch up with Alyssa." Max frowned. "Who are we talking about?" Nathaniel hesitated before he spoke. "They call themselves the Hand of Unity. It's a coalition of some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the country, business leaders, financiers, and media moguls. They operate quietly, behind the scenes. They don't care much for fame. They care about influence." Max felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard rumors about groups like this, shadowy alliances that could make or break politicians with a single phone call. "And they're interested in me?" he asked cautiously. "They see you as someone who can maintain stability, who understands that America doesn't change overnight," Nathaniel replied. "They want a leader they can trust, but naturally they expect something in return." Max's unease deepened, but he knew he was running out of options. With Alyssa leading in the polls and his mother's pressure weighing on him, he was desperate for an edge. He agreed to meet with the group. A few nights later, Max found himself in a luxurious penthouse suite at a discreet hotel in downtown Washington. The room was dimly lit, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a glittering view of the city below. A small group of people waited for him around a large glass table, their faces partially hidden in the shadows. A tall, silver-haired man named Victor Kane stepped forward to greet him. Kane was a billionaire in the energy sector, someone with enough wealth and connections to wield immense influence. "Senator Lowell," he said smoothly, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Max shook his hand, his heart pounding as he took a seat at the table. He could feel the intensity of their gaze, assessing him, evaluating his worth. The meeting began with polite small talk, but soon enough, Kane got to the point. "We're prepared to offer you significant financial support," Kane said, leaning forward. "Funding, media coverage, and voter mobilization in the states you need most. With our help, you can outmaneuver Alyssa Parker." Max took a slow breath, knowing there was a catch. "And what do you want in return?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Kane's smile was thin. "It's simple. Once you're in office, we want favorable policies, support for our industries, certain regulations to be softened, and a commitment to keep taxes reasonable for those of us who drive this country's economy." The words hung heavily in the air. Max's mind raced. He knew accepting their support would mean compromising his own values and surrendering some of his independence. Yet, the promise of victory was right in front of him, within reach. After a moment's silence, he nodded. "I agree," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "If you help me win, I'll make sure your interests are protected." The group exchanged satisfied glances. Kane gave Max a nod, signaling that the deal was done. "Welcome to the alliance, Senator," he said. As Max left the meeting, he felt a strange mix of relief and dread. He had just made a pact with the kind of people he had once despised, those who valued power above all else, willing to bend the rules and manipulate the system to suit their own needs. Yet, with Alyssa Parker leading and his family's reputation on the line, he felt he had no choice. The next day, as he prepared for his next campaign event, he noticed a subtle shift. His social media platforms saw a sudden surge in followers. The news outlets were covering his speeches more favorably, and donations were pouring in. The Hand of Unity was already working behind the scenes, quietly amplifying his presence. Meanwhile, Alyssa's team began noticing the changes too. Her advisors couldn't pinpoint it, but they sensed that Max had gained a powerful new ally. The atmosphere grew more intense as both campaigns braced for a brutal battle. For Max, however, a gnawing worry lingered. He had promised loyalty to people who demanded obedience, and as the days passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a deal with forces far more controlling than he had anticipated. As the campaign picked up speed, Max Lowell felt himself being pulled in every direction. His mother, Mary, was relentless, pressing him constantly to strengthen his stance on key issues. "Max," she would say, her voice sharp and determined, "you can't afford to be soft. Alyssa is gaining momentum and you need to act. Show the public you have the strength to lead. Then, there was the Hand of Unity. Since their initial agreement, they had begun contacting him regularly, each call or message adding a new layer of expectations. We need assurances on the trade regulations, they'd say, or be sure to emphasize the importance of energy independence in your next speech. They weren't just allies. They were taskmasters controlling pieces of his message little by little. Max felt himself becoming less of who he was and more of what they wanted him to be. The vision he once had of making a difference, of being a new kind of leader, was slipping further and further away. Now he felt like a puppet, caught between his mother's ambitions and the demands of powerful strangers. After a particularly exhausting speech one afternoon, Max found himself alone in the hallway behind the stage. He loosened his tie, hoping for a moment to gather his thoughts. That was when he heard a familiar voice call out, soft but steady. Max. He turned to see his younger brother, Danny. Danny had always been different from the rest of the family. He was quieter, more reflective, and had chosen a life far from politics. They hadn't spoken much over the past few years, and Max had often dismissed him as naive, someone who didn't understand the real world of power and influence. "Danny," Max said, surprised but genuinely glad to see him. "What are you doing here?" Danny gave a small smile, his gaze warm yet concerned. "I've been following your campaign, watching from the sidelines. I thought it was time to talk." Max tried to brush it off with a laugh. "Come on, Danny. You know what it's like. Just politics as usual." Danny didn't smile. Instead, he looked directly into Max's eyes, a seriousness there that Max hadn't seen before. "Is it, though? Max, I don't think you're the same person you were when you started this." Max shifted uncomfortably, glancing down the hallway. "Look, things change. If I want to win, I need to make certain sacrifices." Danny shook his head. "Sacrifices? Max, you're sacrificing yourself, your beliefs, your values, everything that made you different." He paused, his voice softening. "I know you feel like you have to carry on the family legacy. But is this really the legacy you want?" Max felt a surge of defensiveness rise in his chest. "Danny, you don't understand. This isn't some game. Mother and the Hand of Unity, they're counting on me. They're giving me the power to make real change." "Real change? Or is it just control?" Danny's tone was steady but unyielding. "Max, power comes at a cost, and if that cost is your conscience, then what kind of leader will you become?" Max's throat tightened as he listened to his brother's words. Deep down, he knew Danny was right. He remembered a time when he believed he could lead without compromising who he was. But now, with the weight of his mother's expectations and the demands of the Hand of Unity, that vision felt like a distant memory. Still, the pressure of the election loomed over him. If he backed down now, he would lose everything: his family's respect, the alliance's support, and perhaps his only chance to make a difference on a larger scale. "I can't quit, Danny," Max said, his voice barely a whisper. "I've come too far." Danny sighed, a trace of sadness in his eyes. "Just remember, Max, that every step closer to power might be a step further from yourself. Don't lose who you are in trying to become what others want." With that, Danny left, leaving Max alone in the dimly lit hallway, his words echoing in Max's mind. For the first time, Max wondered if he was on the path to victory, or the path to losing everything he truly valued. But, as the demands of the campaign called him back, he forced himself to push the doubts aside, clinging to the hope that he could still find a way to reconcile his ambition with his integrity. As Election Day approached, Max Lowell felt the weight of his campaign grow heavier, but he wasn't prepared for the blow that came next. It started with whispers, subtle hints from aides and quiet calls late at night. The rumors said his mother, Mary, had been meeting with the Hand of Unity without his knowledge, striking new deals that would ensure their influence extended far beyond Election Day. One evening, Max confronted her in her dimly lit study, where she was seated by the fireplace sipping tea with a look of calm authority. Mother, Max began, struggling to keep his voice steady. I've been hearing things. People are saying you've been meeting with the Hand of Unity, negotiating behind my back. Mary looked up at him, unfazed. Max, you should know by now that this is how politics works. We do what we must to win, and to keep winning. You're planning to control me, Max said, realization dawning. Even if I win this election, you and the Hand will be the ones truly in charge. Mary's gaze hardened, and she placed her cup down with a quiet clink. Max, you needed their support to get this far. Do you think you could have done this alone? These are powerful people, and they expect a return on their investment. This is the price of power. Just then, Max's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and felt his heart sink. It was a news alert, and his brother Danny's face was plastered across it. Earlier that day, Danny had held a press conference, taking a stand in a way Max never thought he would. He had spoken out about the Hand of Unity, revealing information about their shadowy deals, their manipulation of key political figures, and their willingness to bend the law to serve their interests. The press was buzzing with questions, and the story had ignited a firestorm on social media. The American people deserve leaders who are loyal to them, not to secret alliances, Danny had said. It's time we expose the truth, no matter how painful. Max felt torn, a war waging inside him. Danny's reveal could ruin everything. If he denounced his family and the Hand of Unity, he would lose their support and likely any chance at winning the election. But if he stayed silent, he knew he would be forever indebted to forces he despised, controlled by shadows lurking behind his every decision. He took a deep breath and looked back at his mother, who sat watching him with a steely calm. You have a choice to make, Max, she said quietly. Are you willing to throw away everything we've worked for? Are you willing to betray your own family? Max's mind raced, his brother's words echoing in his head. Power comes at a cost, and if that cost is your conscience, then what kind of leader will you become? After a long silence, he met his mother's gaze with a newfound determination. Yes, he said, his voice steady. If keeping the family together means losing myself, then I'm willing to take that risk. The next day, Max stood before a crowd of reporters, his face pale but resolute. Today I want to address some recent revelations, he began, feeling a sense of freedom wash over him as he spoke. I have indeed worked with powerful allies, but I realize now that my true loyalty should be to the people, not to backroom deals or secret alliances. I am breaking ties with those who seek to control our government from the shadows, and I pledge my campaign to a new era of transparent politics. The crowd erupted in questions, flashes from cameras blinding him as he stood at the podium. He knew his announcement would send shockwaves through the political world, that his mother would likely turn her back on him, and that the Hand of Unity would see him as an enemy. But as he walked away, he felt lighter than he had in months, a burden lifted. Max was ready to fight, not for power, but for something greater. For the first time, he felt like he was truly leading. Election day dawned gray and quiet, the calm before a storm of ballots, debates, and decisions that would determine the course of the nation and of Max Lowell's life. The fallout from his announcement was swift. His bold statement to sever ties with the Hand of Unity had sparked both admiration and skepticism. Some saw him as a rare voice of integrity, a leader unafraid to break from powerful influences. Others saw his shift as a sign of instability, a political risk that made them question his fitness to lead. As he awaited the results, Max found a strange sense of peace within himself. For the first time in months, he felt free from the invisible chains that had bound him to backroom deals, secret alliances, and his mother's relentless ambitions. The decision to break away had cost him dearly. His campaign funding had taken a hit, several influential media outlets had pulled their endorsements, and predictably his poll numbers had dropped. Yet the relief in his heart felt worth the sacrifice. As evening approached, Max met his brother Danny at a quiet cafe, away from the frenzy of the campaign offices and the media. Danny's face was calm, and for the first time in years, there was a genuine warmth between them. You really did it, Max, Danny said with a slight smile. I didn't think you'd go through with it, but you did. Max nodded. I realized that if I was going to stand for anything at all, I had to make a choice. I couldn't keep pretending to be the candidate everyone else wanted me to be. It was destroying me. Danny placed a hand on his shoulder. You made the right choice. It takes courage to walk away from power when everyone else tells you that you need it. I'm proud of you. As they spoke, Max felt the lingering weight of his mother's disappointment and the scorn of the hand of unity. But his brother's support softened the sting. For so long he'd been chasing a victory defined by others, a title, a role, a reputation. But in stepping back from their control, he felt that he had reclaimed something far more important, himself. Later that night, as the election results rolled in, Max watched the numbers on the screen. Alyssa Parker was pulling ahead. He knew that his last-minute shift had likely cost him the win, and while there was a pang of disappointment, it was not as bitter as he'd feared. He had made his choice. As the final results were announced, confirming Alyssa's victory, Max felt a calm acceptance settle over him. He would not be the next president. The cheers from Alyssa's camp echoed through the TV speakers, a reminder of the battle he had fought and the ideals he had upheld. But as he turned to leave the room, Danny stood waiting for him, a reassuring hand on his shoulder. In that moment, Max understood the true nature of power, not the influence others sought to control, but the freedom to remain true to oneself, to make choices grounded in integrity and courage. He had lost the election, but he had won back his conscience, his brother's respect, and, perhaps most importantly, his own self-respect. In the end, Max realized the real power lay not in the titles he could claim, but in the legacy of his choices, the strength to break free and the courage to stand alone.